PBS Hawaiʻi Classics is sponsored by the Olson Trust.
But I can only say that the two architects, when I came brand new from Vienna, who moved me, I didn't know who they were. I could hardly speak English at that time. But they were Claude Steele and Vladimir Ossipoff. Val Ossipoff is about 4 years older than I am. I thought he was my father. That means I had so much awe, so much respect for his ability that I would have considered inconceivable that he could be only about 3 or 4 years older than I am. That's all it is. He was president at that time of the AIA, and we became relatively close then.
But I've seen him take jobs where he knew there was more potential, and jobs that were well into the working drawings, where he'd say, you know, really don't like it, let's start over again.
I've seen that.
I mean, we would have incurred
many times, yeah.
thousands and thousands of dollars in expense, and he'd just drop that job and start all over again. So he wasn't a greedy man when it came to accomplishing the type of design he wanted at all. I remember a couple of jobs.
But he had no qualms about it. I mean, I shouldn't say no qualms. He had a few qualms about it. It was, you know, and that was
this Greg
a
is
lot of,
because
a lot
he
of
wanted to do it,
monetary
not
loss.
the client. Huh? I mean, he
Yeah,
just
because
decided he
he
didn't like
felt
it.
it was
rather
not
than the
right.
client. Yeah,
Yeah, he
that's
decided.
And he
that's
just
the
couldn't
unique
take
thing
it,
that
you know.
You know,
So,
a lot of architects say the
from
client
that
likes it, so what
standpoint,
the hell.
he was called an architect's architect, and he really
Sure.
was very conscientious about that. And money was not the prime object, no matter how many jokes we make about it. He was.
One of the nice parts about Val is that once he's built your house, he sticks with you. If you need to remodel a bathroom or you need to do, any little tiny job that isn't really worth his time, it must be an awful bother, he still does it as though it were the biggest job in the country.
I always had faith, probably more wishful thinking than faith, that it is impossible to design and build in Hawaii without responding to its cultural and geographic climate. And there were others who said, look, that's nonsense. We all work with magazines. We're doing basically only what the magazines show us. So we have now, for the first time, an award which has as outright objective to encourage architects through incentive of honor and reward. They get even a cash reward, a cash award. And Val won the very last one.
Yeah, it was a surprising piece of news, but naturally it's welcome. But you know, that recognition had to take place for a structure which had been up for at least 25 or 30 years. Yeah.
This would seem to be a peculiar requirement.
No, I think it's a very good one because so it isn't the flash in the pan sort of thing.
Vladimir Ossipoff designed this house for Dr. Linus Pauling Jr. and his wife. The completed result of Mr. Ossipoff's design has been deemed worthy by a committee of his peers for a prize, the SFCA Hawaiian Architectural Arts Award. The award had been established by Alfred Price before he retired from the service of the State Foundation on Culture and the Arts. Its objective is to stimulate, among Hawaii's architects and building patrons, an effective interest in a design for Hawaiian-style living, a lifestyle that reflects the natural assets of this island culture.
So our biggest concern is probably directed around how best to use the land in a more dense fashion than what we've been accustomed to, and how to keep the landscaping, how to keep the plants, how to keep the outside into our lives. How do we not enclose our apartments and glass in our lanais, which is done because there's noise and dirt. Makes one wonder, how do we come up with our what we used to call indigenous style or appropriate architecture for a great climate, beautiful place, enhance all the natural values.
If architecture is to give a sense of place rather than merely extending a fashionable trend of the moment, then what quality best describes us in our place of Hawaii? Informal? Yes, our informality is what mainland observers seem quick to appreciate. What else? What about dignity? Isn't that an impression we'd like to give to the rest of the world that visits us or would like to visit us? Therefore, what gives us a better sense of place than an architecture which is both informal and dignified? This is the architecture of Vladimir Ossipoff. Would you like to construct a home or an office? The building process is long and complicated. It requires many decisions. Perhaps the most crucial decision you will make is in selecting someone to guide you through the building process. That someone will be your architect. This can be a rather personal matter. Sometimes the architect may select you.
I had a client the other day, pretty good sized client. I considered whether I should do work with him or not. And after considering it for a while, I telephoned and said that I would not, because I think our tastes were too disparate.
A building is as good as its client. So wrote architecture critic Ada Louise Huxtable.
Without a good client, you can't do a good building.
A poor client gets a poor job. It is a reflection of the client every time. It's a team effort.
I'm actually quoting Val when I say that. He said that many, many times. He needs a good client to do a good job. And I think that's something I respect. And it's something that I'll never forget. And I like to think that I work the same way.
He also had windows across the front of the house, and we said we didn't want those windows. And he said, well, what do you want? We said, books. And he said, yeah. Good idea, I can see that. That's the end of that conference. And we had 2 or 3 other conferences of that sort. And then, of course, as it was building, every now and then Val would say, how do you like that? And we'd say yes or no, and it changed if we didn't like it. But Yes, you were involved in what he was doing, but you weren't bothered. You knew you were working with someone who knew more about it than you did.
It is necessary for an architect to learn to find out what an owner needs, not what an owner wants. Because what an owner says he wants is not necessarily what he needs. And he doesn't know better. Because whatever you're building not for now, but for later.
The Outrigger Canoe Club, when he was explaining this to the members, when we were making a formal presentation to all of the members.
Oh, I know. The catchphrases that you use when your client is not really buying what you want. Remember when we were talking about that?
Yes.
And I said, well, how do you make them understand that that they really don't understand what they're seeing, that it really be good? And you said, well, Val has a very simple way to do that. And he says, when you like it, when you see it, you'll like it.
Right.
When you see it, you like it.
Right.
I never had the guts to use that. I really haven't.
And another thing you use with
That's
clients,
true. That's a good one. When you see it, you'll like it.
Is that when they started really getting too involved in the design, he would just come and say, "Let me do it."
Let me do it.
Yeah. Let me design it. And he always wanted the client's input, but not beyond a certain
that
point.
extent,
Oh, and then I told Val what I wanted, which was a nice square house with a veranda all the way around it, 2 stories. And he said, well, he didn't build that kind of house. He would build me one I'd like better.
What's a good client? One that agrees with you. Not necessarily, but also reasonable dialogue, and one that can see your point of view and accept it from time to time.
And I said, I don't know about that, Val. And he said, well, look at the plans and we'll see. And of course, he was right.
As Francis Otis said not too long ago, in the case of another client, says, you have to go through a long educational process with this client. And I said, well, I'm too old to go through a long educational process now. And we've done that many, many times. Silly, as though we knew better than, well, I think in the field that I'm in, I know more about it than the client usually does. So the educational process does take place.
I'm coming now into that generation that I'm surrounded by 80-year-old architects. You don't have to be young when you're an architect. You don't have to work by inspiration. You can work with experience.
There's an old saying about inspiration, too, that inspiration is 90% perspiration. You know that. You've heard that. And I think that's very true. So I don't look for inspiration.
Experience alone is a major contribution, because architecture is not really the building of buildings, but the setting of stages for life. And the more you know about life, the more interesting the space is.
I think the excitement is in arriving at what you think is a solution.
That he's doing it just right. He figured it out and he arranged it. Cannot be done better. He created and established an office. That means he trained the staff, young people who came to Honolulu, more or less as apprentices, took work with him and became architects in his office.
I'm the father of an awful lot of architects here.
I think it varies with the client. I think it really does. I think a lot of clients you can't possibly intimidate at all, and they're going to tell you. You working with someone like a Jay Scheider or someone like that, you're not going to intimidate them.
And when he felt it was time to retire, quote, he sold his office to his staff under the condition that his own little design office will be permanently open to him. He can come there anytime he wants to, sit there, read, or whatever he wants to. But he has so many clients and so many buildings which need to be altered, improved, built at or to, that they're coming back. He has so much to do now.
I heard yesterday, or the day before, about a firm which got themselves a $1 billion job. No, they were very content. But not for me. Not at this time in life. Have enough problems with smaller projects.
And memorial services, same thing.
He's not only doing alterations, he's doing new work, new projects, which seem to are somehow in connection with older ones.
This front area.
Mr. Ossipoff had done an elementary building for the Punahou School. Later, he designed their chapel. Today, Punahou President Rod McPhee discusses a future project for Mr. Ossipoff, a library and learning center.
How much more space will we have in the library itself than we now have?
Double.
Double the space.
So he will stay young. Architecture is a very rejuvenating profession.
And it'd be nice, you know, because you'll see the stairway going up in easy stages.
Well, because you're constantly confronted with new problems.
What about behind where that power tree is, behind the...
They can be technical, but in most cases, when you're really at architecture, you're dealing with people and their problems.
Well, no. The one main entrance, but there'll be another one. I've been in practice since 1936, which is what now? 36 to 86 is 52 years now. And certainly, I've had disagreements with some, but mostly, my clients have become friends of ours now.
Ours meaning Mr. Ossipoff and his wife, Lynn.
She's saying, you know, Val did the most wonderful wall the other day for so-and-so who is blonde, and she needed a wonderful kind of a pink color behind her. And Val did it, and she just looks wonderful in that room. And so you think to yourself, maybe Val would do me a wall that would help my appearance.
I guess I try to reflect the client. And as Rod McPhee, Dr. McPhee said a few minutes ago, I mean, they like the intimacy that is created by this particular shape.
Whatever the client says, the architect is doing. So the architect ultimately has authority and responsibility for doing it, but takes a risk that the client may be dissatisfied. And that's the problem now. That's a real problem.
That's a very dangerous thing, you know. You want to be innovative, you want to try things, you want to do something that has not been done, and you're gambling with someone else's money. He's entrusted you, the client has entrusted you with a considerable sum of money. You can just do the tried and true thing only, but there's really not much fun there, is it? So you have to try to innovate from time to time.
And then I said I was tired of houses where I walked in the front door and knew right away where the bedrooms were and where the TV set was and where everything. I wanted some surprises. He said, okay.
our construction costs here are much higher than they are in California. So what they do in California would cost so much more here. I think our construction here is, residential construction anyway, is, we use less expensive means of getting at a result. We have to. And we have to, and people are still amazed at how much things cost. Well, as you well know.
And then we went down to his office when the bids came in. And everybody chose a figure that he thought the bid would come in at. And it's very important, of course. We knew that we could afford X amount for this house and not much more, if any more. And the first bid came in, it would have made the Rockefellers cringe, Vanderbilts cringe. It was just way up there in the stratosphere. One woman did faint when her bids came in. She fainted because they came in so low. We almost fainted because they came in so high. Well, it seems that that contractor had not read the plans sufficiently, and he had not done his homework, so that his plan was way off. The next two bids came in very reasonably, and one of them we chose. But it was an exciting experience.
A contractor essentially wants to do as little as possible for as much as possible. On the other hand, the architect wants that the contractor is doing it as well as possible.
You know, why do roofs leak? It's not because they're designed incorrectly. It's because they're applied incorrectly. You have to rely on someone else's performance. There's a lot of troubles in this business, an awful lot of troubles. One thing I am not, never have been and never will be, is a cut-rate artist. Cut-rate artists, you get cut-rate jobs.
But when you worked with basically craftspeople, it depended on your attitude to them. If you exuded faith, they never cheated you, and they did the best they really could.
Those who cut corners perhaps are successful for a while. And we don't use contractors who do that. Because, as I say, you get what you pay for.
When an architect designs a stage for living or working, one wonders if it's possible to allow this creation the power of encouraging one's capacity to grow, the one who will use it. Born in Russia as the son of a Russian diplomatic family, Mr. Ossipoff spent his boyhood and youth in Japan. One might consider this itself an enormous opportunity to grow.
But Val always felt that the Japanese architecture, the traditional Japanese residential architecture, adapted better to Hawaii than it did to Japan. And I think he's absolutely right. These thin walls and these little paper things and that, I mean, they do freeze in the wintertime there. And I think he thought that it adapted better to here with all the flexibility and that sort of thing that you need here in Hawaii.
Val does not consider this a Japanese house. For him, it's Hawaiian contemporary.
It was suggested to me by my mother. She said, "Why don't you become an architect?" I said, "All right." I think the need to define a problem and try to solve it, probably you can grasp it more easily than I could as an artist. An artist has had a very difficult time, I think, sitting before a blank canvas and deciding what to put on it. We work within certain constraints, which is a help. There's the constraint of the topography, there's the constraint of the budget, there's the constraint of taste, there's the constraint of construction. So by the time you solve all these constraints, you, in a sense, you have an easier time of it than a sculptor who has a block of marble before him and must, within that block, create something. Chip away at it, creating something. I think it would be very difficult. And I don't think I could do it.
Could stop at this line. So the red door really will go. Will be the
Mr.
same as this
Ossipoff is a
building.
learning man and a teaching man. His secretary for 15 years said, "You could not work with him without learning something." He's also known for not failing to recognize the contributions of his associates.
The stall doors. Could be
Yes, and I think the other thing is that I can appreciate what they're doing. Yeah. And when a person is not appreciated, it's death, isn't it?
I think what Waikiki needs desperately is to be rebuilt. There's a few decent buildings there, but most of them are not.
Well, I won't live long enough, and you won't live long enough, but eventually it will be rebuilt.
But you see, what we are talking about is eternity.
Yeah, that's right.
We are not talking about our lives.
That's right. So it'll be rebuilt.
Yeah, but you can encourage it, not by doing what most American cities did, abandon what they had, let it rot, and move somewhere else. Because this is what would happen if we permit a new Waikiki being established somewhere else.
Although, as I say, I'm pessimistic about the whole thing, still there are encouraging things. One of the very encouraging things is how much better downtown is than it used to be.
Informality and dignity, two qualities evident in the distinguished architecture of Vladimir Ossipoff, two qualities we like to see in this place we call Hawaii. There is, finally, a discreet sense of privacy in an Ossipoff design. Isn't a sense of privacy helpful to our notion of dignity? What place does Mr. Ossipoff assign privacy in his buildings?
You know, I think it's a very important ingredient. I think a short answer tells the story. I mean, everything else can be assumed.